Hey listeners, you know we've got a Patreon, right? Where supporters get early access to all our podcasts, bonus episodes, discounts on merch, and access to the Feminist Frequency Discord? Well, now you do. Get all this fun stuff while supporting our show at patreon.com/femfreak. That's FEMFREQ. Like a magic dance with a broom that has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. Like the movie's trash.
Is this Newsies?
No, this isn't Newsies.
Okay, because that sounds like Newsies.
No, this is worse than Newsies. Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio, where everything is running perfectly smooth. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by the president and CEO of the Tim Curry fan club, Ebony Adams.
What's up, fellow Tim Curry lovers? No one else. I say hello to no one else.
I feel like there's going to be a little bit of competition on this podcast for that title, so we might be duking it out, Battle Royale style in the bonus.
I'm unafraid to fight.
Don't you trust me?
I trust you, Lily. Nothing is more magical. As long as they roam the earth, evil can never harm the pure of heart.
Hey. Oh boy, I'm excited about this one. Because this week, we've remained firmly in the cheesy movie past by viewing one of my childhood favorites, Legend. Directed by Ridley Scott and hitting screens in 1985, the film stars a pre-couch jumping Tom Cruise, Ferris Bueller's sassy girlfriend Sloane, but most importantly, his royal badness, Mr. Tim Curry. This movie has everything. A Tangerine Dream soundtrack, the finest goth couture, and did I mention Tim Curry? Holy shit. Curry and his amazing red abs drip with sexy malevolence as the Lord of Darkness, a demon prince hell-bent on casting the world into eternal night by destroying the supreme symbol of goodness on all creation, the unicorn. Allied against him is Jack, a sprightly forest lad portrayed by Tom Cruise. This is 1 year before he is in Top Gun. His innocent paramour Lily, played by Mia Sara, 1 year out from Ferris Bueller. And a wacky array of sprites, pixies, and fairies, including Honeythorn Gump, played by that weirdo Swiss kid who played the weird Polish kid in Tin Drum. No matter which version of the film you see, there are three, it is a glorious, florid, Baroque banquet of scene-chewing, gorgeous cinematography, and jaw-dropping costume and makeup design. Does the film stand up to the test of time? Did it remain one of my favorites after this most recent viewing? Let's talk about it. And jumping in to talk about it with us is returning special guest, writer Charlie Jane Anders. What's up, Charlie Jane?
Hi! It's such a thrill to be here again. Oh my God, thank you for having me, especially for this incredibly special occasion.
Yeah,
so
here's here. When Anita and I were planning this season of the podcast, I must admit, a lot of the trash that you're going to hear us talking about this season, you can place the blame for that squarely in my corner. Because I was like, Anita, let's talk about films that everyone else has seen, but we haven't. So that's why we wound up watching Titanic. Let's talk about childhood favorites. That's why we're going to be watching Legend. Let's talk about one of my favorite novels, Song of Solomon. No, obviously that's not trash. But the point is, we're giving way too much leeway this season. So if you have complaints, direct them at me, at Ebony Aster on Twitter. I'm not going to respond to nobody, but feel free to get it off your chest if you want to, whatever. But can we talk about this bonkers movie? Anita, had you ever seen it before?
Yes. Let's do. Okay, first of all, I am sad that we're not. So last episode we did
kissing in love about this movie. Yes.
Okay, last episode we did a live video recording of the podcast recording for our patrons, and I'm really sad we're not doing one this episode just because of mine and Charlie Jane's reactions to Ebony reading that intro was fucking priceless. But anyways, okay, so Ebony, we went into this meeting, like she said, and we were just like, childhood favorites, movies we never want to watch. What do we got? What are the themes we got? And Ebony's like, Legend. I was like, what the fuck is Legend? I have never heard of this movie, which I think is, but I know Labyrinth. Yeah, and this movie is squarely in the wacky fucking 80s Labyrinth orbit. And so and obviously Labyrinth is culty and is like transcended its time and all of that stuff. But like I started watching this and was like, oh, this is exactly Labyrinth. Like, not that it's the same movie, but it's clearly that same bonkers shit that we were doing in the 80s that I kind of miss. Like so anyways, I had zero relationship to this before watching it. Didn't know anything about it. Didn't like, the cast is amazing.
Yeah.
I can't believe I hadn't heard of it. So I'm curious what y'all's relationships are with this movie. Because I don't have any.
Obviously, I've already stated this is a childhood favorite of mine. But Charlie, can you tell us, like, had you seen this before?
I had seen it before, like maybe 10, 12 years ago. I did not see it as a kid. I was unaware of it as a kid. I feel like there's a lot of 80s movies I missed out on, including a lot of those 80s kind of like fantasy, just wacko fantasy epics like this and Labyrinth and Dark Crystal. I've only watched all of them as an adult. So I saw it like 10, 12 years ago and I was like, what the heck is this? This is just like, oh my God. And actually, so I just watched it for the second time and I actually liked it better the second time around. I was like more able to just roll with it and kind of just like appreciate it for what it is and like, for the Tim Curry-ness of it, but just generally the campy joyfulness of the experience.
I don't know if I think this is a compliment, but as soon as Ebony was like, it's this weird movie with Tim Curry and unicorns, and I was like, maybe we should get Charlie Jane on.
That's like, exactly what happened. And she asked me,
the first person I thought of,
what it's about, so that I can frame this request appropriately to Charlie Jane. And I was like, I don't know what to say. I honestly don't, because there's either you've seen it or you haven't. Either you're ready for it or you're not. But like some 3-sentence, invitation over email is not going to convey. This movie is bonkers. It is absolutely bonkers. I'm
curious. So Charlie Jane was like, fuck yes, I'll do it. And I was like, man, I'm so on point with guests. And because it's about me, obviously. And but then Charlie Jane, you were like, well, which version? And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about?
What I knew.
So Ebony.
That's my girl. That's my girl right there. Yes.
Why? Tell me about the different versions of this movie.
There are 3 versions that I know of, and I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Charlie Jane, but there are 3 versions. So there's the director's cut, there's the US theatrical release, and then there's the UK theatrical release. Did
we all watch the same version is the question.
I own the DVDs, so I have seen the director's cut and the US theatrical version. I don't think I've ever watched the European theatrical release, which apparently is slightly different. And in fact, some of the arguments, yes, I've had arguments about this movie with some of my friends from the UK, and because we didn't realize we had watched different versions of this movie, but they each have a little bit of like just their own weirdness going on. And it makes no sense to me that like there's not some master cut. I don't even want editing. Just give me all the footage you shot, give me the 17-hour master mix.
I don't want all the footage, but I want of the whole movie, but I want to see every single iteration of Tim Curry's takes. Like, I want to see every minute.
Yep.
Like, look, it opens up, whatever, there's some boring shit that happens, and then Tim Curry comes on, and you're like, he is magnificent. Like, I couldn't even, I think I recorded a video and sent it to you all being like, what is this? I didn't know how much I needed this in my life. He's so like, is flamboyant the word that I'm looking for? Like there's something about the way he plays this character of darkness that is so over the top, but also kind of muted. Do you know what I mean? Like it's totally ridiculous, but also it kind of makes sense. And you're like, yeah, that's who this character is. That's how this character would be, which I think is just an enormous compliment to the performance.
He has this sort of over the top kind of dignity to him. Like he seems like he actually takes himself kind of seriously, which like contrast that with his other like big famous role, Frankenfurter, where he's clearly making fun of himself the entire time. He clearly knows he's playing a ridiculous character who knows that they're ridiculous. But here he's like playing a ridiculous character who takes himself very seriously, or who at least has like a core of longing and weird and desire and like a kind of a wounded inner child or whatever. And so I feel like, he's just I feel like there's more layers, like, in a way. I love it. And like, I was watching the movie the other day and like, I was realizing, oh, there's like the most recent Bootsy Collins album, like contains some sound bites of Tim Curry's like speeches from this movie. And I feel like other Bootsy Collins albums have also just like sampled bits of Tim Curry from this movie. I think that Bootsy Collins is also obsessed with Tim Curry and Tim Curry's like, you know, gonzo performance in this movie. So that's an endorsement right there.
I need more trivia like this. Yeah, I think Darkness is okay. I saw this movie when I was a kid, like when it came out, like in theaters with my dad. And we both left the film feeling, you know, unsatisfied because in 90% of it is like the story does not hang together in any sort of, you know, comprehensive way. There are holes and everything. And yet, nevertheless, we were so pleased to have seen it because it is such an experience when you surrender to just the beauty of what you're seeing. And Tim Curry's like absolutely magnetic presence. So it does not surprise me that this movie, you know, launched so much shipping, you know? So like you would have to have no pulse to not be drawn to this giant, you know, orange man and his, you know, his huge horns. But just the way he, you know, I mean,
Goth Lily resisting him was very, I was like, what are you doing, woman?
Right
like, I was like, you look, I was like, yo, Lily, you look fucking dope. And also, like, why would you not want this stunning stud of a horseman?
Especially if your other option is fucking Tom Cruise.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, like as fucking Peter Pan. Like that, you know, there's nothing odd about that.
But yeah, I just think like Tim Curry, I mean, he's known for giving it. He has never given a halfway performance, no matter what role he's in. He's going to inhabit it and just, you know, luxuriate over every single nuance, you know, of each line. And so when you give him something like this, oh yeah, he's going to hit it out of the park. If you've not seen this movie, please do yourself a favor and watch it, because it's so him, and yet he completely disappears behind the makeup and costuming, such that, I mean, to this day, I'm still like, that's Tim Curry? Of course that's Tim Curry. But that's Tim Curry. That's his body. That's what? Like, you've been hiding all that, sir? Come on. So good.
Yeah, it took his voice for me to be like, oh, that's who. Oh, I see it now, right? Mm-hmm. I loved the little goblin that rhymed. Yes, there's a line. Yeah, there's a line that's early on that says, maybe innocent, maybe sweet, ain't half as nice as rotting meat. And I was like, yeah, buddy.
So one of the things that happened as we were preparing for this, and I had to like practically tie myself down to a table to not come over to each of your houses to talk about this early, was Charlie Jane emailed us to say, by the way, let's talk about the amazing Robert Picardo playing. I
know. Oh my God. This, right? That just that destroyed my brain when I realized. Oh my God.
Someone else who has never said, oh, I'm going to play this small. Someone who consistently is like, you know what? I will not minimize. So we're going to.
He commits. Robert Picardo commits.
Yes.
So for those of you who don't know Robert Picardo by name, he plays the doctor on Voyager, the wonderful, the holographic doctor. Yeah,
the nature of the medical emergency. That's
so good.
He's such a like charming actor. Can I just tell the thing?
Please.
So I saw his name in the credits, and then I was watching the movie, and I was like, oh, I'm going to keep an eye out for Robert Picardo. And then I was like, where the heck was Robert Picardo in that movie? And then I went and Googled, and that scene where like there's like a evil kind of like bog witch, like kind of swamp lady who wants to eat Tom Cruise and is like kind of like, nah, I'll get you, my pretty. That's Robert Picardo wearing like just like a metric ton of latex and makeup and stuff, and just like acting his little heart out, like as this like underwater witch. And like there's a video online which I sent to Ebony and Anita where Robert Picardo talks about how he was almost decapitated doing that sequence because like he had to rise up out of this swamp and like go through a metal trap door, and it was like, man, he gave a lot for that for our entertainment. And he just, one reason I want to see the director's cut is apparently there's a lot more of him just like camping it up in it. So I'm like, man, I want to watch that one of these days.
Yeah, so back in the day, I wrote like a very short piece for feministfrequency.com about the figure of the crone. Well, about senior citizens and infirmity and age in horror more generally, but included a little bit about Meg Bucklebones, because I'm fascinated by the way like the body in decline, and in particular the female or female coded body in decline, is meant to be like an object of revulsion, right? And it's very interesting to me that often the way that this gets, represented on screen is via these male actors dressed up as, old women with like sagging breasts and loose skin. But it's one of the things that's so great about that scene with Meg and Jack, played by Tom Cruise, is how it starts off with this flirtation, right? This like, you're so beautiful. And Meg appears to be going for it. But in her mind, that hunger, like there's no difference between the hunger for like some sort of like romantic or sexual entanglement and the desire to consume. It's just so great because I love the way like it sort of traces the way, I don't know, like myth and folklore keep having these kinds of figures pop up.
I mean, I think the undercurrent, no pun intended, of this movie is the notion that female desire is inherently destructive. And that female desire is basically like the undoing of everything. Like not just like obviously Meg, because like you said, she kind of wants to like her sexual desire is kind of sublimated into her desire to just like devour him like physically and kill him. But then, the main lady, Lily, like she's basically like the cause of everything bad that happens. And we're reminded that over and over again. And her character is so like thinly sketched that there's no reason to like have any positive opinions about her until the very end, which she suddenly, does a 180 and is like, no, actually, I'm going to like help save the day. But it just kind of comes out. It's not really built up to, it's not earned or anything. And like, she seems like early on, all she wants to do is manipulate Jack into giving her what she wants and, kind of yank his chain. And she just, she just wants to see the unicorns and then she wants to touch the unicorns. And he's like, no. And she's like, fuck off. Sorry, can we allowed to curse? And then,
yes.
But then there's also the other kind of baffling character. I'm forgetting her name, but the lady fairy who's like
Una.
Una, the like secret, like she's a secret pixie or whatever. Like she's a spark of light who everybody thinks is just a spark of light, but she's like an undercover pixie. And she's like, she wants to kiss Tom Cruise so bad that she's willing to like doom everybody if he won't kiss her. And like, it just feels like there's something going on in this movie. And
absolutely.
Allegedly, the director's cut kind of ends with Jack telling Lily, well, maybe we'll still hang out. I don't know. Like,
I'm going to send you the director's cut because I want you to see it because it does end with them apart. It does not end with like sort of the stereotypical, fairy tale ending. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, what do we know about unicorns from mythology? Right. Their weakness is innocence, or we're told their weakness is innocence, but specifically embodied via young female virgins, right? But so you have that, sort of as the fundament to this. And then, absolutely everything that goes wrong, every source of danger in this movie is because women be horny, women want things. This is a problem, it's delicious. It's horrifying. What you don't get in the US theatrical release, but you do get in the director's cut, is a little bit more of the exchange between that like peasant woman that Lily goes to visit the farmers. Right. And I mean, she is safe and she's painted as being a safe figure, you know, like in the hub of domesticity, but it's not dark where she is. It's very quiet. It's a loving, safe domestic space, because she is safely out of that realm of like sexual danger. She's, you know, a middle-aged woman. She does not represent sort of the allure of the young nubile woman, you know, and she tells Lily, like, you need to behave as a proper young woman. You know, it's inappropriate for you to be doing this and to be running wild through the woods and just, you know, meeting strange people, you know? So she's safe, but every other female character in this represents a danger, a profound danger, not just to the people around her, but to creation itself. We are the rulers, you know, and what we say affects lives. What can I say?
I mean, it's very much like the Garden of Eden kind of thing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I did love that in the theatrical cut, that first scene between Lily and Nell, the older lady, where like in the theatrical cut, it's basically like Nell is like, I look upon you as a daughter, which is why we should never hang out again. And then Lily is like, I think your life is so magical and all I want to do is spend time with you, which is why I'm leaving immediately. It's like, I feel like that scene needed a little more unpacking, maybe. Like,
well, I'm going to tell you this right now. You don't get more unpacking. You just get more footage in the director's cut. It doesn't make any more sense. But you do get like 20 more minutes. It also doesn't have that amazing, cheesy Tangerine Dream soundtrack, which I think is a real flaw. Like, you know, you talked, Anita, about how this fits into the tapestry of 80s epic fantasy movies like Labyrinth, like, you know, Lady Hawk, you know, all that stuff like that. There was a real, like, I don't know, sincerity, the just sheer going for itness of fantasy films in that era that took themselves very seriously in a way that we just don't often get as much of. You know, I'm not saying it's completely been eliminated from our media, but, you know, just this kind of like wide-eyed what if sort of approach to telling a story. In addition to posting a link to that piece that I wrote on age and infirmity and horror, I'm also going to post a link to something I always share with people, which is a music video by this guy, Chris Dane Owens. And this dude, okay, give me a minute here. His dad was the voice of the announcer on Laugh-In back in the 60s. So they had family money, okay? He is a musician, the son, Chris, and spent $1 million of his own money filming a music video to a song he wrote called Shine on Me. And it is this huge fantasy epic that he stars in naturally. It's like, I think he's a pirate king for part of it. And he's like a warrior king. And another part, there's a beautiful busty princess. There are evil witches and whatever. And, you know, it became like this sort of like cult sensation, this video. Because this guy's just like, who's this random dude spending all this money on this video? But what I love about it and why I keep going back to it is it represents that same sort of lack of cynicism, that embrace of imagination that says, what if, you know, once upon a time. And I can't resist it. I can't resist that non-ironic position, that completely, utterly sincere, sort of like almost childlike embrace of fantasy in these things. So good. So good.
Yeah, I couldn't, I know I said this before at the beginning, but like, you know, Labyrinth, like I'm shocked that I didn't know this movie existed. And because I'd seen Labyrinth many times, I think like I'm assuming a lot of people are familiar with and have seen or heard of Labyrinth. So, I think I'm an anomaly in having not heard of Legend, because I mentioned it to a few people and they're like, oh yeah, yeah, maybe. Oh yeah. You know, like there was that kind of like, I might have seen that sometime in the 80s. It also reminded me a little bit, this is very tangential, but a little bit of Farscape, because you do get these like creatures and these Muppets and like, and maybe I just don't watch children's programming anymore, but there was something really in line with, what you're saying of like, it is so much of its time. And that we don't really have that same kind of energy in things these days. Right. And when we talk about these big fantasy epics, or the sincerity of them, I keep going back to my frustration with superhero films and like James Bond and those sorts of big epic adventures that are all just dark and brooding, you know, and I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, so I'm not going to like beat a dead horse on this, but I think that there was something refreshing about watching this where you're like, it's just a wild romp. Like there's literal like the production design is like bubbles. Like there's no reason for there to be fucking a bubble machine in the background, but they're just like in hell, locked up, and there's bubbles floating around, and you're like, yeah, cool. Like it's so whimsical and absurd. It's almost like they put a bunch of words in a hat and shook it up and was like, well, that's what it's going to be now. You know, I was just thinking about how the whole mythology around they severed the horn of the unicorn, which those unicorns, man, I don't know. I couldn't get over them. But they severed the horn of the unicorn, and the whole town turns, you know, winter, which is my nightmare. I'm like, yes, this is awful. But then hell is like a fiery hellscape, and I just kept being like, but do you want the cold or do you want the fire? Like, because these are two different kinds of climates, y'all.
Listen, you get it all when you have darkness.
But that's
charge,
the thing.
And I'm ready to see things to him. The food
and that's
looks great.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's the thing, is that this was just, it was everything. They were like, you got an idea? Put it in there. Like, it doesn't matter. You want to have some fucking fried steaks? Put it in there. You want to have a wintry wonderland? Put it in there. You want glitter? Great. Let's do it. It felt like unabashedly, there was never a no, but kind of in the best way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think of this as like kind of the continuation of like, I mean, Ridley Scott did Alien, he did Blade Runner, both of which are movies that are so visually striking and have such like completely like bonkers production design. Like, especially the production design in Alien, where it's just like letting H.R. Giger, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, like just put like, you know, weird sexual imagery everywhere that you look, and like, you know, just KY jelly dripping all over the place, like on every surface. And then like, you know, and then Blade Runner, where it's like, you know, this kind of noir, but like very neon, very saturated. I feel like Ridley Scott was just in the 80s super fascinated with the idea of like having like really intense beams of light shining through mist or glitter or bubbles or whatever. But like, he was like, what could I like shine a giant floodlight through that's going to look really cool? And that was like,
And he was right every time.
and that opening, like, I kind of was hooked at the very beginning. Well, first of all, wait, I'm thinking of a different movie. Sorry. I watched this sci-fi movie the other night, but the opening is like just this like forest, like this fluffy forest, and it's just shots of this fucking forest. And I'm like, wow. Like, I just had this moment of like, this is really nice. I guess because I didn't know what to expect, but it was just like this, you know, he set a mood. He set a mood. And it was good.
Yes, that's exactly it. He set a mood. And
except Tom Cruise. I don't like Tom Cruise. He bugs. And then Tom Cruise is a fucking like Peter Pan with like a glittery dress. Like, I mean, not I'm not trying to be shitty about gender, but like it looked like he was wearing the equivalent of a little black dress the whole time, which but except with glitter.
Armor, Anita.
Yes,
his
but
armor.
I was like, that's what I would see someone wearing out to like a premiere or like a club. Like, it's just like,
If you're lucky.
yeah. Anyways, I think it was cool that they're just like, here's his legs. Like, look at Tom Cruise's legs the whole time. But it's a fucking choice, right? Like, it was a choice. And then the one character is topless the whole time. And I'm like, man, were you cold filming this the whole movie? Like, for however, whatever. The costuming was...
I can't imagine that this thing wasn't a nightmare production. Like, it had to have been. And you know what's so great is like, there are scenes that look as if they were shot outside. Like, some of the scenes are in the daytime. But so many of them are clearly on a set, right? So it really just, you know, contributes to this, like, you know, push and pull, immersion, you know, alienation from the story, because like you are constantly confronted with like the performativity of it, you know, these people sort of enacting a play. But yeah, I mean, Charlie Jane, I think, you know, Ridley Scott. So if memory serves, didn't he get his career start as like an art director?
He was a production designer with like the BBC originally.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the dude absolutely knows how to construct things visually. And so you can't, there are many things you can say about this movie and other ones that he's done, but you cannot fault how they are put together visually.
I want to know, like, how do you go from making Alien and Blade Runner to making this? Like, how did this?
He had a story like this kicking around in his head. The dude's probably been thinking about this since he was 6 years old, because it's like a 6-year-old wrote it.
Oh, man.
Oh, did he write this?
He didn't write it, but he had the idea for the story. The person who wrote it, interestingly enough, is the same dude who wrote Angel Heart. Have you seen that? Oh boy, that's what we ought to talk about on this fucking podcast. It's I feel like a whole Robert De Niro.
We should have just a whole season of just Ebony's brain. Just like
no one wants, least of all me.
I would love that. I think that sounds fascinating. I think like I would learn so much about you.
But here's the thing. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. So
that's true. That's true.
I feel like there was this, just an answer to the question of how you go from like Alien and Blade Runner to this movie. I feel like there was this moment where like everybody wanted to like pivot from like, you know, kind of like science fiction, especially like slightly darker science fiction, towards like fantasy in the 80s. And like George Lucas was making Willow.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I feel like there was just like, and I feel like Spielberg also made some fantasy films in the late 80s. Wait, when was Hook?
Yeah. I mean, okay, so Legend came out in 85 and Labyrinth came out in 86. And I'm sort of fascinated at how trends happen. So like the same thing will happen at the same time. And they couldn't, it's not like it was like a planned thing that like, you know, the fashion industry, whatever, like sometimes has these cycles that are sort of like designated sometimes. But like in this, like if vampires becoming popular again around Twilight, it wasn't just Twilight. There was a lot of things in the works at the same time that it was happening. And so the fact that like Legend and Labyrinth were like a year apart means that they were being created around the same time, likely not really aware of each other.
I bet that there were people in Hollywood like just having lots of meetings and being like, you know, we gotta, that's the new thing. Fantasy's the new thing. I hear so-and-so over at Warner Brothers is doing a fantasy picture. We got to get in on this, you know? I sort of picture that happening. I just also think,
that's fair.
You know, like in the mid 80s, the blockbuster movie as we know it was so brand new. Like it really started, I guess, with Jaws like 10 years before Legend. And like, you know, we hadn't gotten the tentpole as we know it yet. And so I think people were still just trying to find the formula, like that, you know, okay, we have the occasional giant smash hit like Star Wars or Raiders of the Lost Ark or whatever, but what's the formula for making like a movie that's just going to like be huge? And I think by like the late 80s, they kind of find it, and then movies are just what they are like for the last 30 years.
Does this sound accurate that like, I'm sort of paraphrasing, just to clarify, like it's almost like there was still kind of a Wild Westy feel in movies where people were still just testing stuff out and doing different things. And there was more of the studios were willing to take more chances on stuff. Whereas now it's like, well, it's all about like, we know how this works. You're going to, you know, put it in a machine and give us an algorithm to produce the thing that's going to make us the most money.
I mean, not to wonk out about this too much, but this was the era when people still made movies for kids.
Yeah.
Like that pretty much ended in the late 80s when they invented the PG-13 rating, and they were like, oh, the teenage audience is what we really want to get. And so little kids will make movies that they can maybe watch, but they're not going to be the audience anymore. And so that was part of it. And I think it was just, there were people just like having fun, goofing off, experimenting. I mean, you look at Dark Crystal, which is around the same time.
There was a lot of cocaine, Anita.
Yeah, that's true. That's
cocaine. Oh my God, yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, this movie was super fun. I'm really glad you suggested it.
I'm glad you didn't hate it, because I really do. Like, I have such a fondness for this movie. And one time, I think I was sick, and my partner and his 2 kids were over at the house, and I was, you know, crashed out, and they were just looking for something to watch. And they watched Legend, which I had started watching and then got sick and, you know, went to bed and whatever. So they finished watching like the last hour of it. And I could hear them from the other room just nonstop cracking on this movie. And it broke my heart. Like, I have no ability to be, you know, objective in any way about this movie when people actually don't like it. Because yes, I don't know, it exists in that safe space of childhood that I don't know. I can never allow anyone to cast any mud at it. So, if
totally.
you had come on and been like, this is garbage, and more importantly, it's unenjoyable garbage, it would have represented a real rupture in my love for
It would have
you.
been over.
It
We would have
been over. I wouldn't have
live
finished the
here.
podcast. Yeah.
End of everything. Yeah, I feel like it's so hard to separate our like childhood nostalgic feelings from the things that we engaged with at the time. And so like there's music that I listened to as like younger or like early teens that I would never listen to today. But I love it because I have that association with it. I can't imagine asking someone today to listen to it and be like,
what? Give me some examples. Debbie Gibson?
no, I'm thinking like some punk music that I listen to, or like I actually this is not an example of this, but I've been listening to like garbage radio on Spotify, and I'm shocked at how I know all the bands that are coming up on it. And so just like PJ Harvey and Tori Amos and like all this music that I like deeply listen to and have all this like physical and emotional memories attached to these bands. I'm not saying that those are the bands I'm referring to, but like anyways, we all have those things. So, you know, there was a movie I watched years ago and was like I went through this whole like social justice dance movies and watched a bunch of them. And there's this one, I forget what it's called. It's from the 80s, and there's like randomly a scene where the kid dances like a magic dance with a broom that has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. Like the movie's trash.
Is this Newsies?
No, this isn't Newsies.
Okay, 'cause that sounds like Newsies.
No, this is worse than
Rob,
Newsies.
please let that be the teaser. That sounds like Newsies.
But a friend of mine was like, how on earth could you hate that movie? Like, I don't understand. And it's because she watched it when she was a kid and she has all these like feelings attached to it. So
I really want a list of social justice dance movies. Like, I desperately need this list.
Great.
If you put the list together with
I've been
somebody,
trying
then
to
come back on and we'll watch them.
I suggested this and Ebony was like, no, that sounds terrible.
I do not remember this conversation. So you might have been talking about two things at once. And I said, that sounds terrible to the other thing.
All right.
'Cause I will always watch a dance movie.
Can we have our social justice dance movie month? Do you want to be on our podcast for a month, Charlie Jane?
I mean, yeah, but I think Annalee is going to be sad if they don't get to join some of it.
Oh, yeah.
They can join too?
We've been on like a major Kenny Ortega kick lately. Like we've been just like obsessed with Kenny Ortega. Do you love Kenny Ortega like we love Kenny Ortega?
Yeah.
Do you know who that is?
I'm Googling right now
Okay, so I will just tell you about Kenny Ortega really
to see if
quickly.
I know.
So Kenny Ortega, he directed the movie Newsies, actually. He directed all three of the High School Musical films. He directed all three of the Descendants films for Disney Channel.
Oh my God, he's directing the new Dirty Dancing that was announced that I don't know about. What the fuck?
That's
whoa.
news to me. He directed he
whoa.
choreographed like everything, like every music video you've ever loved. He choreographed all of Michael Jackson's like tours and things. He directed. He was in charge of the TV show Julie and the Phantoms, which is my life. He also, he directed so many like important films and choreographed. He worked on the movie Xanadu and like studied with Gene Kelly.
Oh my God, he directed Hocus Pocus. That movie's trash. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I haven't actually watched Hocus Pocus yet, but we're legit obsessed with it. Kenny Ortega. We're obsessed with like his origin story, which is that 1972. Sorry, you're gonna be sorry that you allowed me to talk.
No, I won't be.
No, not at all.
1972. A young Kenny Ortega, and by the way, I can send you. Annalee found a picture of what he looked like back then, and he was like this incredibly gorgeous man with like flowing long hair and just like early 70s kind of like hotness. So 1972, young Kenny Ortega is touring in a production of Hair. And they go to South Carolina, where the local police chief hears that this like scandalous, trashy musical is coming to his town in South Carolina, and he decides to show up so he can see for himself the trashy scandalousness. And so young Kenny Ortega, foolishly decides to go into the audience and sit in the police chief's lap and give him a big kiss. And the next thing you know, the police are planting drugs in Kenny Ortega's hotel room, having him arrested. He would have gone to prison for life. And the only reason he didn't go to prison for life was there's actually two reasons. One, the local judge was a huge fan of Hair, like loved Hair, and like was like, no, you're not going to do this to one of the stars of Hair. But also, the police chief arrested Kenny Ortega under the name of the character he was playing in Hair because he thought that was the guy's actual name. He like was not smart enough to understand that that was a character that Kenny Ortega was playing and not his actual name. And so he arrested him under the wrong name, and they took him to court. Was like, we're arresting this character from Hair. And like basically a ton of witnesses came forward and said they saw the police planting drugs in Kenny's hotel room. And like, so the police chief was disgraced and lost his job. Kenny Ortega went on to be an icon. But there's an alternate universe where we didn't get any of Kenny Ortega's like wonderfulness because of this shitty police chief. And, you know.
What the fuck?
I mean,
wow.
Yeah.
What a story.
That's amazing.
I'm still kind of freaking out that they're making a new Dirty Dancing. I'm going to end this podcast and go and have a slight freak out because Ebony, Legend is your childhood movie. Like Dirty Dancing is my childhood movie, you know?
Oh yeah. We know.
I know.
And the fact that like, how have we not done it on the podcast? Is it because you're afraid that like,
I don't know. I thought about it when you were like, so when Ebony was like, you know, movies from our childhood, I was like, what were my movies from my childhood? And then what I thought of was I had 2 VHS tapes of movies that were taped off of TV. Like just like, you know, whatever, you know how you just recorded when movies were playing on TV and then you have all the commercials and everything in it. So it was Die Hard 2 and Sleeping with the Enemy. Which I definitely watched inappropriately young. And so I was like, well, I guess we could do that as my childhood movie.
Which I love when kids, you know, become fans of something that they're not quite ready for. And yet they're deeply involved in the world. It's like when you go to your grandmother's house and, you know, she's watching soap operas and you're, you know, addicted to Young and the Restless over a summer because you're watching, and you're like 6 years old and you're like, listen, let me tell you about Victor Newman and Nikki and what's going on with them. You know, like, I love that shit when it happens. But with the Enemy, I'm just imagining like, what is going on in tiny Anita's brain?
I don't know.
Because the story is horrible. Like Julia Roberts, this is the one right? Julia Roberts
is. Yes. Okay, so. She's trying to get like deal with her abusive husband. And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Why? I did not have a lot of rules around what I could or couldn't watch as a child. There's a couple, but my mother obsessively watched The Young and the Restless. This is what the bonus is like, y'all. I can't believe we're doing this in Maine. But my mom was obsessed with The Young and the Restless, so I watched a lot of that growing up. And I wanted to be a chemist because Ashley made perfumes, and I thought that was really cool. So then I get to like, I don't know, high school or whatever, and I'm like, cool, chemistry. And then I immediately am like, nope, not for me. This is awful.
What's involved? Yeah, not into it.
Anyways, okay, let's wrap this. So if that conversation was exciting to anybody, that's usually what happens in the bonus. But let's take a quick break and come back with some freakouts. We all need a little emotional support from time to time, but don't always have the resources or access to the support that understands us. I know it would have been life-changing if during the height of the online abuse against me to have anyone else who understood what I was going through. That's why me and my team built the Games and Online Harassment Hotline. We provide free, confidential, emotional support for people who make and play games. Because we are people who make and play games too, and we get it. You can learn more by texting info to 23368 from anywhere in the US, or visit gameshotline.org. That's info to 23368 or gameshotline.org. Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us and moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Ebony Adams. Tell us about your feelings.
Oh boy, danger zone. Am I the last person to have started watching Station 11? Like, I felt like it was all over my Twitter timeline. And then I was like, fine, whatever. Started watching it. I'm 5 episodes in. I love this show. So if you're like me and late on everything, it is based on the book by Emily St. John Mandel, I think is her name. I'll correct it in the show notes. It is the story of what happens after a flu-like pandemic decimates the population. Excuse me. And decades on, how the survivors are sort of, making a life for themselves and finding joy. I'm only 5 episodes in, so there's some weirdness that has started to amp up around the figure of this character named the Prophet and who he is and what he represents. But whatever, it is so good. The cast is amazing. It feels like we don't get too many shows like this that are not straightforward, that don't have sort of like easy resolutions, in which, people are really trying things. I've not read the book that the show is based on, but I absolutely want to. I can't wait to finish. It's one of those things where I've been watching it with my partner, haven't been able to sync up. He's about to lose his shot. I'm about to binge the rest of the series because I cannot wait. But it is so good. And Anita, you said you've watched it, like you just finished it, right?
Yeah, I just finished it. I think the last episode came out last week or something. I watched it the week it came out.
Okay. So in your mind, does the quality hold up throughout?
Yeah, I'll say, okay, no spoilers. I will say that when there's some stuff that comes up around the Prophet that almost made me bounce. Because I was like, this got stupid and I don't like this.
Okay.
But I'm glad I stuck with it. Not because I can't finish that sentence. I'm glad I stuck with it despite some things that I still feel towards the end, because I think that the storytelling and the performance is really amazing. The episode that sticks out for me the most is the flashback airport episode, which I think is phenomenal.
Yeah,
like just so fucking good. I think that there is some inconsistencies in episode to episode, but overall I liked it, and I was like, I wanted to watch it each week, and when it ended I was like, wow, like yes, that was a pretty solid TV show. So and I'm just really interesting. Like
exactly, like it's so interesting, but it's also kind of weird, right? And so I'm wondering, it is hard to get something made. Okay. So I'm wondering what the conversations were like when this property was purchased for adaptation, and Patrick Somerville, who's showrunner on it, is like, okay, we're going to fully embrace the weirdness here, so that's in many ways like a post-apocalyptic kind of story, but it's not your standard like zombie, movie. There's, it's something different. It explores different sorts of issues, larger issues, in a way that perhaps we're not accustomed to seeing in this sort of story. Certainly reading, like, I think there's more space for this kind of thing in literature, but less so on TV, where we take fewer chances. I'm overjoyed with it.
Yeah, and I suspect it was pushed through because it is pandemic related. Like it was probably not the way that the story was being told, but because of that. I've been told that it became a little more pandemic-like. Like our contemporary pandemic, from the book, because of like modern times or whatever. And I will say, for people who are going to just start watching it, the first episode is tough, because like I watched it, we like kind of height of Omicron. I started potting again and like stopped seeing people. And you're like, this is too real. This is too real. And then like at the end of that episode,
I haven't watched it yet.
But I'll say that at the end of that episode, moving forward, there's enough like back and forth in time that it doesn't hold that heavy weight that the first episode did. But the first episode is very like, I remember that, which again, I think the writers included intentionally in some ways. But anyways, I recommend it. I like it.
Do you remember what Javine's brother's apartment in Chicago? Do you remember that beautiful apartment? I wouldn't have left that for nothing. That's not relevant to anything. But if you watch this, hit me up and tell me I'm right. Like, you couldn't have moved me. I would have lived and died there once this thing went down. So
I'm curious. Come back and do a freak out when it ends, Ebony, and see if how you feel when it's wrapped up. Because All right, my freak out this week is a movie called Aniara. Aniara. It's a Swedish. It's a Swedish sci-fi movie from 2018, and the idea the premise is that there is a ship, like a cruise ship in space traveling from Mars to Earth. And it's like this state-of-the-art high-end cruise ship that will get you from Mars to Earth in 3 weeks. Like high-end passenger ship kind of thing. And they get diverted off course with no fuel. And what happens when you're stuck on a ship? That's what the movie's about. It's very well done. Highly recommend it. Aniara.
My mom watched that movie and she keeps being like, why haven't you watched it yet? So now I've got like 2 people telling me to watch it. So
that's it. There you go. Watch it. Charlie Jane, do you have a freak out for us?
Yeah, I do. So I've been reading a couple of books, like one that I finished reading and one that I'm almost finished reading recently, that both are kind of about like empires and colonialism, and specifically like, people rising up against colonizers. They're both fantasy novels. The one that I've already finished reading is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan, which is just such a great fantasy epic. It's kind of loosely based on Chinese history about like the founding of the Ming Dynasty, but it's super queer and super just like fucked up and weird and interesting and a little bit violent, I would say, definitely, especially towards the end. And it's the first book of a duology, I think. And like, it's about like the 2 main characters are this girl whose entire family dies, and she steals her dead brother's identity and becomes a monk and ends up becoming kind of a leader of like the resistance against the like Mongol Empire in China. And she pretends to be a boy, but like goes around basically killing everybody in sight. And then there's the other main character is a eunuch who is like one of the warlords in the Mongol Empire, but secretly wants revenge against the people who killed his family. And it's so intense and so queer and so just like exciting and just so well done. I was just like, I was spellbound. And then the book I'm reading right now, which I'm almost done with, is The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke, which is, it's another fantasy novel. It's set on another secondary world, but it's very loosely based on like French colonization in North Africa. And basically it's about this young woman named Turin, who is part of like, she is from this like, country called Khazal that was like, I'm probably mispronouncing everything and I apologize, that was colonized by this country called Ballader that's basically like France. And she's been colonized to the point where she believes her own people are savages are basically animals, and that she's better off having been kind of raised by the colonizers. But then she's sent back to her home country to help kind of put down a rebellion, and ends up kind of joining the rebellion. That's a bit of a spoiler, but she also has this kind of like on again, off again romance with like the princess of Ballader, who's like this colonizer who wants to do better, but doesn't know how, and kind of ends up making a lot of terrible choices. Everybody makes terrible choices. It's, that's part of why it's so addictive, but they're both such great books, and in different ways are kind of talking about like decolonizing our fantasy stories and like what it means to kind of fight against colonization and empire, and what it means to, or what it means to try to like create your own empire in the case of She Who Became the Sun. Just super exciting, fun reads, but they kind of have a lot of really interesting questions bubbling under the surface. Highly recommend them both.
Nice.
I'm adding both of those to my TBR pile.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah. Hell yeah. All right, y'all. If you want to submit a freak out, you know how to do that. Just go to feministfrequency.com/freakout. FREQOUT. Thank you so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Charlie Jane Anders, we love having you on.
We really do.
Yay! It is my absolute pleasure.
I want you on all the time. What you working on? What you want to promote? How do people find you?
Well, I am still co-hosting.
How many books do you have coming out?
Oh my god!
This month? Sorry.
Only one new book coming out this year. Thank goodness. Last year it just almost broke me. It was like just promoting nonstop. It was crazy. But yeah, so I'm still co-hosting the podcast Our Opinions Are Correct with Annalee Newitz, and you can find that at ouropinionsarecorrect.com. And we just did an episode with Jamel Bowie talking about whether the United States is still going to be a country in 50 years.
Survey says probably not.
I mean, Jamel was more optimistic than I thought he was going to be, but I don't know. I'm still not sure. But that was really interesting. We've had some really fun episodes recently. Also, I do have a book coming out this year, the second book in my young adult trilogy. The first book was Victory is Greater Than Death, and that's out in paperback in February. But then April 5th, the second book, Dreams Bigger Than Heartbreak, comes out, and it's already you can pre-order it. If you're on NetGalley, you can get it on NetGalley.
I want it
places already.
Immediately. It's weird. I know the author of that book. Maybe I can.
I bet we could work something out. I bet we could.
I'm so excited. Go read the first one if you haven't yet, so you're ready for the second one. Everybody, it's fucking great.
Yes.
Speaking of wild, free, sincere romps in fantasy spaceland.
More romps. Yes.
More romps.
That's what I'm looking for.
Definitely more romps. Hell yeah.
Amazing. All right, y'all. Next week, we're going to be talking about the film Eve's Bayou with another amazing guest. Our show is engineered by Rob Pera. Carrie Stimson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. See you in the bonus, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.